Hello and welcome back to the Political Storm. I'm your host, Sean Storm. I appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. Before we get started, let me ask you a very simple question, but I want you to pause and truly think about your response and not have the knee-jerk reaction of everything's great, my party does fantastic, things of that sort. I want you to actually truly think back. So here's the question. How well has the two-party system been working for you? Just for some background, my first election that I could vote in when I turned 18 was 1992. And I can honestly say, at that time I was a registered Republican and have been a registered Republican until October 2020. In my lifetime, I have never felt that Congress was functioning the way it should. I honestly felt that with it supposedly being the voice of the people, which is what Congress is supposed to be, specifically the House, that the most powerful branch of the government has failed. Spectacularly failed. As a matter of fact, right now, the president is considered the most powerful position in the United States, which it was never intended to be. Our founding fathers went out of their way to ensure we did not have a king in our country. George Washington gave up the presidency to ensure that he would not be viewed as a king. After FDR's third term in office, we put term limits on the presidency to ensure that no one would view the office as king. And yet here we are today with senators and House of representatives that have been in there much of their adult life, or at least much of their late adult life, I should say. Personally, I'm of the opinion that all elected positions should have term limits, but that's a whole nother video. With that said, let's view the third parties as far as why are they needed. You need a little bit of history. Throughout the entire 2000s, I'm talking about the year January 1st, 2000 until today, there have been only four independents, 2 in the House and 2 in the Senate. Interestingly enough, they are registered independent, and that's what they're listed as, or were listed as, during their service. Why weren't they third party? Why didn't they choose a third party? The 2 from the Senate were both Democrats, registered Democrats, ran as Democrats before and won posts, things of that sort. But they lost their primaries and decided to run as independent and did not choose a third party. The same happened in the House, but with Republicans. The Republicans lost their primaries, so they ran as independents without choosing a third party. Why is that significant? Because it shows how ingrained the importance of the two parties are compared to anybody else. Those representatives were so worried about losing their contacts and the support they had from their parent party that they refused to choose another party to represent and get their posts through. If I could give you some examples, Bernie Sanders, Democrat most of his life, and he's in the Senate as a independent for Vermont. He, if you look at his voting history, he exclusively votes Democrat. But he doesn't want to lose their support as a party, so he chose to go independent instead of, say, the Green Party, which seems to be more along his lines of belief. I'm actually working off notes, so excuse me as I almost dropped them. Going back to the question of how well is Congress working for you, on a national level, Congress has is polling, and this is as of January 18th. Today is now February 7th, but just a few weeks ago, a poll was put out as to what type of job, how well the public thought that Congress was working. It has a 15% approval rating. Donald Trump, who had the worst approval rating throughout parts of his presidency, love him or hate him, the lowest he got was in the high 20s. I think 26% is the lowest he ever got. Congress has less national approval than the presidency ever had. And it's been historic in the amount of displeasure the public has for Congress and the work they do. If you do take it by state, the polls that I looked at, which were garnered through Vox and also from the Washington Post, which I know a lot of people are going to say those aren't reputable sources. I also got it from PolitiFacts. They ran polls for how is your representatives from your state doing for approval ratings. They did it for Virginia, for Kentucky, for Florida, and for California. So that way it would be a good mix of red and blue states. And the average is 29%. 29% of people don't think that their representatives represent them. That's why third parties are needed. Because your voice is not being heard. The voice of the people that's supposed to be the House of Representatives and Senate is not the most powerful branch of the government like it's supposed to be. They're the ones that are supposed to be designing our laws, making sure we're kept safe, making sure that we're taken care of as a nation. But the majority of laws are now being passed by the president in the form of executive orders and by courts, by making decisions on previous laws, adding to those laws to make a decision on what the laws should look like, instead of going through Congress as it was intended. So I'm going to touch on why third parties are having a hard time, but I'm not going to go in detail because that's going to be the next video. But you have the illusion of choice is the best way to describe it. Before primaries ever happen, up to 2 years prior to primaries occurring, both parties have already decided what candidate within their own party they're going to back. A good example is Amy McGrath. Before the year of the Democratic primary in Kentucky, the DNC had already started backing her 2 years prior. By the time that she went into the primary year, she went up against her strongest opponent, and I'm afraid I cannot remember his name. I do not have that written down. It was Michael, and I want to say Bilkin, but that probably sounds wrong. But they both have very similar backgrounds. But in the need to be, I'm going to say, politically correct, there more than likely were other reasons in there, but that's just how I feel. Again, I am biased a little bit against the Democrats myself because of my Republican background. But for the need of feeling the need to be politically correct, she was chosen to be the leader for the primary by the Democrats 2 years before the primary ever occurred. She went in with a war chest of over $2 million at the beginning of the primary year, where her opponent, another Democrat, had been for a good long time, was a businessman, had a military record, much of what you would look for as a Kentuckian. He even had a farm. He would meet the needs of what excuse me. As you can tell, I don't edit the actual content. I'm still learning. But what Kentuckians would look for in somebody to represent them, even though he was a Democrat and had many Democrat beliefs, he had a background that I think would appeal to many middle-class Kentuckians. He went in with only $500,000 because the Democrat Party did not back him prior to the primary year, and of course not during the primary year. She got funding from people in Wall Street and things of that sort. So that's what I mean by the illusion of choice. People always say that term limits are not necessary because elections are term limits. But that's not true if you don't really have a true say in who is up for election. As a Republican, if I were voting in Kentucky, I would not have been able to choose Mike over Amy. As a GOP member, I couldn't choose somebody over Mitch McConnell if I was a Democrat. As a third party, you wouldn't get to choose in either primary. And then all you're left with is choice A and choice B. It's not supposed to be two or three people in a back room saying, okay, this is who we're going to put up for people to look at, and this is who we're going to put up for people to look at. And that's the only choices they're going to get, because everybody else isn't going to get the same airtime and FaceTime with the public that everybody else gets. On top of that, Democrats and Republicans are doing what's known as gerrymandering. If they win most of their state, they get to divide up how the state's votes are counted in districts and such, which then leads to control over how votes are counted. When did this happen? Why did we give this control to parties? I don't recall in the Constitution, any part of the Constitution that states that you had to have so many dollars in the bank, or you had to have so many signatures on hand before you could ever be considered to be put on a ballot. That came in history through both parties working together to ensure that it was hard for anybody that wasn't their choice to run. Period. So let's go back to why third parties are important. And I'm sorry to have gone off on that tangent, but it's kind of important to understand that. So why third parties are important is, say you have two people arguing over something that is convoluted and difficult. A dispute over land. You need a third person to come in and look at things separately, calmly, to help choose the best way to resolve the issue. A magistrate, a judge, someone to play the middleman. What about when you have corporations that want to build something together that both their names are going to be on, but they can't choose the process in which to do so? Oftentimes a third party will be brought in to help say, okay, this is the goal we have in mind. This is the process we should have. Oh, no, we need to do this. Okay, so then they take a little bit from party A and party B, and they come up with plan C. That's the benefit of third parties. It does not need to be a majority party. That's one of the concepts people seem to fail to understand. It doesn't need to be a majority. Just imagine, in the Senate, there are 100 senators. If we had 12 that were of a third party, or even multiple third parties, that did not vote 100% of the time with Republicans or 100% of the time with Democrats, how much more fair would decisions be? How much more would actually get adjusted to meet the needs of the people if you had a third party come in and be like, no, let's not do that because what they're saying over here makes a little bit of sense. So let's tweak it and do this instead. And then you garner a little bit more support from the other side. In the House, I believe we're 438, 443. You have to excuse me. My memory isn't great, and I don't have the number in my notes. But what if we had 60 representatives? Just 60 out of 400 plus that were of a different party. Sure, you still have a supermajority here and a super minority there, but then you have a true minority party. You know what's interesting is that in the House and in the Senate, that the minority whip is a Republican in both parties now, or in both sessions now. But there's independents on them. Aren't they the minority? You see what I'm saying? The third parties are needed to bring balance back, to bring true voices back. Right now, I have heard in the past 12 years, you can't work with these people from both parties. As a matter of fact, with the latest resolution in the Senate that they passed to be able to get the third COVID relief package pushed through without Republican approval, they've made it to where they just need a simple majority, 51 votes, which would be all the Democrats and the vice president voting against the GOP. It shouldn't be that way. It's that mindset of you can't work with these people. The whole job description of a politician is to work with others for the good of the country. Instead, we're having politicians that are working for the good of their party to continue the growth of their own wealth, to push forward agendas that meet their party needs and party wants so they can stay in office within their party. That isn't what our representatives are supposed to be. They're supposed to represent us, their constituents, the people in their states. Instead, they're representing a party where only a true I would say 12 to 15 people in the hierarchy of the party have any say on what happens as a party and what their goals are as a party. I'm not saying you need to leave the Democrats or the Republicans. It'd be wonderful if you came to the Reform Party as I did. I invite everybody to do their research on the Reform Party. We are hopefully going to have our new platform for the next 4 years released sometime this March. But even if you don't, even if you stay within those two parties, don't just blindly vote your party in every election because you want to ensure that the Democrats don't win or the Republicans don't win or they don't get this seat or get that seat. Look at the individuals that are running, not their party. What are they trying to bring to the table? Does any of it match your wants or needs? Does the candidate from your party actually show in their history that they will act on what they believe? Will act on the platform that they've created? That's what you need to look at. Thank you very much. I will be putting out another one within a week or so. And this one will focus on the hurdles for third parties, which I touched on a little bit. I do have some people within my own party asking why I'm not releasing videos yet on our stances and beliefs as a party. First of all, I am not vetted or approved in these videos at this time with the Reform Party. I'm hoping that comes in the near future. Secondly, as I stated, we have yet to release what our platform is going to be publicly until probably March or so. So I'm waiting until that time before I create videos on things such as health care, which Democrats seem to want to be moving us to a single payer source, and Republicans have yet to really ever give us what their view is on one. I do have a couple ideas on that, but again, it has to be approved by the party before I will release it. With that said, I hope you have a great afternoon, evening, morning, or rest of your day. Thank you very much, and I hope to hear from you soon.